I refuse to not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncer's guilt ring.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day.
This is Umar for IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. I'm joined by the Daily Mail's Jeff Powell. Final press conference for Joshua Franklin. Expecting a routine win for Joshua this weekend, Jeff?
There's nothing routine about AJ these days. He'll need to be set firm to try and win it from the off. He needs to be more aggressive than he has been in recent fights, in my opinion. I'd like him to sort of nail Franklin with a couple of big shots early on to get his attention to the fact he could get hurt. And if he doesn't do that, Franklin's not got the experience of these mega fights. He might grow into the fight as it goes in that cauldron of an atmosphere, and it might become more dangerous for AJ the longer it goes. I think, I hope he takes him out early and he doesn't get entangled in a bit of a problematic fight later on.
What's your understanding of what could be next for Joshua if he does win this Saturday? He did say on Monday to the press that he wants 3 fights: Wilder, Fury and Joyce. Those are the 3 that he named. Realistically, do you think we see one of them in the summer, or do you think it'll be Dillian Whyte?
Well, if he can draw out Tyson Fury, then I think that there's every chance that could be the next fight. Tyson, of course, said after the last set of negotiations between them broke down for the December fight, that he was fed up with the way that Joshua handled it and pulled away, veered away, and after wasting so much time on it, he was never going to give him the courtesy of fighting it. I think AJ comes through this fight okay, and hopefully comes through it spectacularly. Then the prospect of one of the greatest British fights for a long time in Wembley Stadium, with all the attention and all the money that would bring, might appeal to Tyson, or he might make a fuss about getting there and get demanding as he did with Usyk. But I think it's a possibility as long as Joshua looks good on Saturday.
Okay. I did see an article that you ran a couple of days ago where Eddie Hearn made some comments to yourself about, he expects to be exchanging contracts next week with George Warren because they had conversations about that fight. And then I saw George Warren made some comments on your article saying that, that's not accurate. It was a 30-second conversation, and he's not even spoke to Tyson Fury about that fight with Anthony Joshua. So your thoughts on the 2 sides in the article that you ran?
Well, I reported what Eddie had to say, and George's response. But George did have a very brief conversation with him, and Eddie made it sound like it had been more substantial than perhaps it was. Perhaps he wants to start the ball rolling. He's a busker, isn't he? He likes to sell fights and get them going. So maybe there was exaggeration. He said, basically the talk about the contract was they had a contract in place for December. That could basically still be on the table and could be tickled quickly. And George's father, Frank, has come out and said, that's impossible and inconceivable that could happen. Okay, that's a view from that side. But George did say that they discussed that Fury Joshua in that conversation.
And just lastly, away from the heavyweight division, we've seen some comments from Robert Smith that came out last night saying that he feels it's disrespectful to the sport that Eddie's looking to stage Eubank Jr. and Benn in Abu Dhabi, given what happened with Conor Benn and his 2 positive tests. So just get your reaction to that as well, please, Jeff.
Yes, it's a difficult position for the British Boxing Board of Control. There's been a few things which haven't sat well for the image of boxing. The Benn's drugs tests, the collapse of the Usyk negotiations with Fury. It hasn't sat well with the boxing public and frankly with all of us. But they've got a bit of a conundrum because Benn won't produce his documentation for them and for UCAD. They can't come to a hearing and a decision about whether they feel that he was responsible for the positive dope tests. Now, the problem with that is, the problem for Conor is that there's a different standard applied than the WBC applied. They just the bar they set was we can't prove that he deliberately ingested a performance-enhancing substance. The responsibility is much more severe with UCAD and the British Boxing Board of Control and many other authorities, that you are responsible for whatever goes into your body, whether you meant to do it or not, whether somebody spiked your drink, whether you didn't read the package on the small print on the package. You are still responsible even if you didn't even know you were taking it. And I think that's perhaps a bar he can't meet, and that's why he ripped up his license. And so far hasn't delivered his massive documentation to UCAD. So now they're sitting there, the British Boxing Board of Control. I can understand their reluctance for him to go off and fight somewhere else. But the difficulty is whether they legally can deprive someone of earning their living abroad. They've had problems with that kind of thing before. They're saying they'd be reluctant to do it, but I think and going to the Middle East might not be the most appealing, the best look for British boxing if that happens there. But I understand that there's a strong suggestion that it could actually go to the United States, where there are some commissions which are not as strict as others, not as strict as Vegas or New York, who would gladly put that on and would then ask the British Boxing Board of Control to give it its blessing. If that happened, I think it'd be very hard for the Board of Control to say no to you.
Jeff, appreciate your thoughts, and maybe we'll have another catch up throughout the rest of the fight week. Thank you very much.
Okay. Pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff.
Refuse to not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 16, 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncer's guilt ring.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day,